what I wanted to share with you all today is really focusing on the use cases. And the use cases that I'm going to be talking to you guys about are kind of unconventional. So, you know, as agencies, we always talk about the products that we create for our clients. And in particular, when it comes to data, what kind of reporting do our clients need? How do we make it work? How do we customize it? How do we brand it? But actually, what I wanted to share with you guys today is the use cases that we have experienced behind the scenes that didn't come about by design, and they came about naturally. And we eventually decided to lean into them and develop them into something that our clients could buy. As the guys have said at the start, we have time set aside for Q&A towards the back of the session. So please save your questions, and I will be very curious to have a discussion with you all. So just a little bit about my background and kind of where I come from. I lead the marketing function at the Data and Technology division at GroupM. And prior to that, I've spent probably the last 5 years pitching Looker products to our clients, designing our user onboarding approaches for users. I've also led a number of custom development initiatives for reporting tools based off of Looker. So I've probably experienced the platform from as many angles as you can imagine. And through that process, I've also engaged with a lot of the wonderful team that make up Looker. So I'm really pleased that I can share all these experiences with you today. In terms of my context, and again, kind of where I'm coming from into the media landscape, just a couple of words about what GroupM is and does before we dive in, so you understand where the perspective is really coming from. So GroupM is the world's largest media investment company, and we're responsible for something like 1/3 of global media billings, which is quite crazy when you think about the numbers, through the agencies that make up the group. So the names that you probably know quite well: Mindshare, Mediacom, Wavemaker, Essence, and M6. As the Data and Technology division within that group, we're really focused on using technology to provide brands with a perspective that's grounded in both privacy and precision. And our mission throughout our time at GroupM and through my time in kind of previous agencies has always been to make sure that whatever we do is we're liberating marketers from the routine daily tasks that occupy a lot of their time and headspace, to give them back the time to focus on strategy and creative decision making, which these days is getting really, really hard to find. So speaking of the media industry itself, since we're all in it one way or another, where we're all affected by it, advertising and media is going through quite a dramatic change right now. And candidly, it's always been a dynamic industry, but this year and next year are going to be really, really pivotal. The regulatory environment is getting increasingly tough when it comes to data usage. Consumers are becoming increasingly aware of privacy laws and the choices they have when it comes to their data being used. We're looking at an increase of usage of AI and decisioning that's machine-driven, and content that's dynamically optimized. So all of these changes, when you combine them and you apply them to a single industry, means that clients, and actually every actor in the industry, has really high expectations of each other, but particularly of agencies when it comes to their level of data literacy. Because you need to make sure that what you're sharing, how you're sharing, and what you are using to drive the efficiency of campaigns is not only precise, but also ethical. So a lot of our work with Looker, and the reason we've kind of chosen to partner with Looker, is because we've managed to up-level the data literacy at our agencies to a level where the non-technical users can do basic data modeling. So this is kind of the journey and the story that I wanted to share with you today. Our story with Looker started, I think, back in 2016. At the time, we had a big challenge in front of us. We wanted to provide customized immediate performance reporting to our clients, and we wanted to have it custom at scale, right? So that's kind of the notion that has attention built into it. Custom is not meant to be done at scale, but so were the demands of the marketplace, and we wanted to automate it because in agencies, when you report on campaigns, this is quite a time drain. And the more fragmented the media industry became in terms of the number of walled gardens, the number of platforms that activation users had to juggle, the harder this task was becoming. And actually, all the technology that was emerging was making this fragmentation even worse. So it wasn't really helping. So what we started out by doing is by looking at our existing tech assets that we had built in-house, right? So what we did have in-house, and we thought it would be a great kind of starting point, is we built a campaign stewardship product, which was working at global scale. We had lots of markets, lots of advertisers using it. And campaign stewardship is kind of a blend of a project management software and a billing software, which is essential for agencies because you need to stitch together lots of different teams, lots of different billing points, partners, and you need to make sure that everything is managed in a really, really smooth way. And eventually, you need to make sure that you're transparent with your clients in terms of how the campaign is doing, not only from a performance standpoint, but financially too. So this campaign stewardship system was generating incredible amounts of very useful metadata. So it was tracking our decision-making history. It was tracking the client briefs that we were getting. It was tracking business context, industries, all that incredibly, incredibly useful data that we knew if we could surface that would bring a lot of value, not only to our clients, but actually a lot of operational value to how the business works on the agency side too. So we thought, okay, so we built this great campaign stewardship product. Why don't we go and build a reporting product? So we started out, we kind of chose a client who we thought could serve as a good prototype. And we've started to develop this reporting solution for them. And frankly, it didn't work out well. So we spent something like 6 months trying to build the reporting interface, the data modeling backend. We tried to develop, architecture that would be great for that client. When we deployed it, when we actually tried to roll it out to that client, and when they started to interact with the product versus hearing about it from us, they realized it was not what they were expecting. They wanted different metrics. They wanted more flexibility. They wanted to be able to export things, as Excels or as PDFs. And our product just didn't do that. It was a very simple interface where you would just log in and see standard metrics. And honestly, we did that because we really believed that we couldn't make something custom at scale. So we made the product very, very simple and very basic. And that simple, basic thing that we made just didn't work. It was just wrong. So what we started doing is reconsidering the whole build versus buy approach that we've had in the past. So in the past, when we needed a problem solved, we would go and build a solution. We realized when it came to data, that was not the right thing to do. We didn't have the skill set. We didn't have the time to find those people, train those people, and build that solution from the ground up. And more importantly, when we looked outside, we saw that there were, teams like Looker doing this incredibly well. It just hasn't been applied to media at the time. So we approached Looker. We decided that we wanted to partner with them, not only because of kind of the way they were approaching data modeling in a very kind of democratized way, but also because of the culture and because we felt that we could really work with them as trusted partners. And we've re-architected our entire reporting solution around Looker as the data modeling layer. So what we did is basically take all of the partner feeds, all of the data sources that you see on the left-hand side, we brought them into a Google Cloud data lake, which is kind of our term for a little, large data set that we segment by advertiser and agency. And then, whereas in the past, at this point, the data would be surfaced and all the modeling would be done in the data lake, we changed that and introduced a data modeling layer through Looker. And in that data modeling layer, we built basically 3 macro models. So we had the foundational model that defined very simple terms such as what is spend, what is an impression, what is a month, what is a day. So we kind of set the general parameters that would apply to anyone. And then we started developing layers for agencies. So we started doing this exercise with Essence. So what does Essence need? How do they define their regions? How do they define their cost per 1,000 impressions? How do they define their cost per click? And it might be the same as other agencies, but it might be different. That was the next layer. And then the last layer, which was really the game changer for the clients, was these individual advertiser models. So for instance, NBC Universal and Peloton are clearly, 2 very different businesses, care about very different things. So something like cost per acquisition would be a unique metric that each of those would define in their own ways. And because we had individual advertiser level models, we could define that for each advertiser and have it live in that data modeling layer. And then when it came to surfacing, we basically had 2 types of data visualization, which we also decided to do through Looker. There are, by the way, ways that you can do data visualization not involving Looker. It's not our preferred option, but you can do that. You can just use Looker for data modeling. And in terms of visualization, we had kind of 2 strands. We had our operational type of reporting, which is what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. And then we had custom reports and dashboards, which was the kind of final product that the agencies would deliver to clients. And once we've gone through this exercise, everything changed. And I'm not exaggerating because we wanted things to change, but we've experienced some very positive kind of adverse effects from rolling out this new architecture and rolling out the Looker interface that we could not have forecasted when we set out to do this exercise. So there was basically 3 major effects that we've experienced. So first, we could now create stable data models for the entire agency and update them with a fraction of the time and effort versus our previous in-house solution. So that was just an enormous time saver for the development team. Secondly, we had configurable data models for individual clients, which meant when the agency won a new client and they had to onboard them really quickly, that onboarding process and experience was much shorter and much easier. And lastly, and this is kind of the bulk of my talk today, is that we have enabled all users to write their own queries, and not just the technical ones, not just the analysts, not just the developers. So this is what I wanted to talk to you guys about today in terms of the use cases. So our product, because of the complexity, because it sits in the agency that's used by client advertisers, it has lots of user groups, probably around 10, 7 are frequent users, 10 in total, excluding any engineers or developers. But today I want to talk to you guys about 5 user groups who are not analysts or data scientists. They are what we call kind of our non-technical business users who, when we were designing this solution, we were not expecting them to use Looker as much or actually at all when we set out on this exercise. So just so we kind of have our roles clear as I go through them, we have our strategists that kind of look at macro trends within agencies, and they engage with brands maybe once or twice a year to provide a very high-level overview of what the recommendations are and what works and what didn't work in the past. We have our media planners that engage in more tactical planning kind of on a quarterly basis. So they would look at what is the brief for the quarter, what is the brand trying to achieve for this quarter, which partners do we engage, and how do we do that in a smart way? How do we invest the media dollars in the best possible way? Then we have our activation specialists who are basically in platforms, like the Googles, Amazons, and Facebook of this world, every day optimizing campaigns, launching, trafficking, analyzing how the performance is going. Then we have our finance teams that deal with billing and reconciliation for the agency, and our ops team, which is actually the most unexpected user of Looker. And they really use the platform to understand how operationally how we're doing as a business. So when it comes to the strategist, they really need macro trend data at industry and channel level to provide insight to clients as to what happened, why it happened, and what the future direction should be given those kind of past trends. So what they would usually do is they would pre-build a look for each type of question they wanted answered for a given kind of channel, industry, or partner. So for example, they could ask something like, how much did we invest with partner X last year, and what results did that investment produce? So because our campaign stewardship system that I mentioned basically tags every piece of activity that goes live at the agency, we're able to slice and dice the data from the very granular kind of placement level up to industry, client, quarter, year level, whatever it is. The strategists would usually, as I said, only do this maybe once or twice a year. So they're not very frequent users. However, when they do get access to this data, it's very, very value adding to them because there isn't really another place where they could access something like this. Our media planners are another interesting group. So they really need audience and partner level data to create informed media investment strategies. It's usually done on a quarterly basis, but things change and replans happen all the time. So typically they would look at a client brief and they would break it down into kind of subtypes of data questions that they could answer using Looker. So for example, a type of question could be, how did my cost per acquisition compare on my last campaign for Airbnb for Facebook versus Instagram? So they would pull in their cost per acquisition, the channels, so in this case, Facebook and Instagram. They would pull in the date range that they need to assess and the brands or categories that they're looking at. And this way, they only have to build this look once, and they can always use it. It's refreshed live, and they can even share it with clients if they need to, or with the internal teams. So you see here on the screenshot is a type of kind of brand metric dashboard that a media planner would set up, and they could use it for themselves. It's honestly much nicer than working in 20 Excel sheets, or they could share it with their clients and their teams. We then have our activation teams that actually use Looker daily. So they would look at what optimization levers do they have available to them, and they would build a look potentially for every single one of them. So for example, they could look at what are my top converting brand terms, and they would pull in brand terms, cost per conversion, as well as conversion rates by day. And that gives them a very solid live picture of what is happening in their channels. The beauty of this is that obviously they're already using other platforms to manage the activity, but it's very challenging to actually pull all those things together into a single view. And they're now able to do that using Looker. They could also share these dashboards with their clients, as I said before, which is a big value add, because if you think about it, usually what you're using to optimize your campaigns versus what you're sharing with clients is two different things. And here it's the same. So it saves a ton of time for everyone, and it means that data is accurate. We then have our finance team that have set up kind of internal checking dashboards to make sure that we were in compliance with all the requirements that we have when it comes to billing. So they usually vary by client and by region. For example, they could ask questions like which campaigns went live without having client approval or PO. Hopefully none, but things happen. So they're able to build a dashboard that helps them to diagnose those sorts of issues. And lastly, we have our operations team, and in particular, the HR and talent teams that look at how efficiently are we operating as an agency. So they would look at things like staffing parameters. For example, they could ask questions like how many media dollars is each employee in Australia managing in Q4 by level of seniority. And if they see any irregularities in there, they can obviously make changes to the teams, or they can speak to teams managers. So it becomes really actionable data. And this was enabled by plugging in our timesheeting software data from 10K feet into our data lake and matching that with the metadata from the campaign stewardship system. So this has been really, really powerful, because if you think about a service business, any business where human time is your most valuable asset, you want to make sure that this time is being spent in the right way, in the right places. So before we jump into questions, our future plans and challenges that we're working on is really at expanding this approach to the group. We've always been very iterative with how this reporting system approach software has been developed. So we're always looking to learn from these unexpected use cases as they keep popping up every now and again. And we're always thinking about how can we make it better, how can we make it more useful and more flexible. And Looker have been a great partner for us in doing that.